Life inevitably brings us face to face with an undeniable truth. People enter our lives and eventually leave. We form bonds, build connections, and often anchor our emotions to these relationships. Yet, when those bonds are severed, whether suddenly or gradually, it can leave us grappling with profound emotional weight. How do you handle the void left by someone who no longer occupies the same space in your life? Or worse, how do you reconcile the realization that they may never have shared the same emotional investment? Questions like these naturally arise. How can I stop caring? Is it truly possible to emotionally detach without losing a part of myself? This is where the philosophy of Stoicism, especially the timeless wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, provides guidance. The Stoics were not about suppressing emotions or turning cold to the world. Instead, they mastered the art of understanding emotions and learning how to balance their impact on our lives. Emotional detachment is not about becoming indifferent or distant. Instead, it's about reclaiming the clarity and inner peace needed to navigate life's inevitable challenges. In this article, I'll walk you through 5 timeless Stoic rules that teach us how to emotionally detach from someone. Using the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius as our guide, we'll move beyond theory into practical advice that can reshape the way you engage with both yourself and others. Number 1. Embrace the impermanence of life. One of the most fundamental truths that Stoicism teaches is the inevitability of change and the transient nature of all things. Life as we know it is constantly shifting, evolving, and moving toward new forms. This truth, though simple, can be unsettling. We often strive for stability, for permanence, and for certainty, but the reality is that nothing lasts forever. Relationships, situations, feelings, and even our own lives are in constant flux. Embracing this impermanence, however, is one of the most powerful ways to cultivate emotional resilience and inner peace. The wisdom of Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher-emperor, frequently reflected on the transient nature of life. In his meditations, he often acknowledged the fleeting nature of both life and the things we hold dear. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This quote speaks to the urgency of embracing the impermanence of life. By acknowledging that our time in this world is limited, we become more present, more appreciative of the fleeting moments we have, and less attached to the things we often hold on to out of fear or desire. Marcus Aurelius wasn't advocating for a life of nihilism or despair, but rather encouraging a mindset that helps us live with greater wisdom and gratitude. He understood that by accepting the transient nature of life, we can free ourselves from the destructive grip of attachment. Rather than resisting the natural flow of events, we can learn to flow with it, finding peace in the acceptance of life's impermanence. Life's constant change. Take a moment to reflect on the cyclical nature of existence: birth, growth, decay, and death. These cycles occur in everything: nature, relationships, personal growth, and even our emotions. Just as the seasons change, so do the circumstances in our lives. Relationships begin and end, jobs come and go, health fluctuates, and even our inner worlds are constantly shifting. While change can often feel uncomfortable or unsettling, it is also the very thing that allows us to grow and evolve. If we were to resist the flow of change, we would be fighting the very force that propels us forward. But by acknowledging that everything is impermanent, we gain the freedom to live fully in each moment, without the need to cling to anything for fear of losing it. Attachment and suffering. The root of much of our suffering is attachment. We become attached to people, possessions, outcomes, and even ideas, believing that our happiness and peace depend on them. But Stoicism teaches us that it's not the external things themselves that cause pain. It's our attachment to them. When we cling to something, we create the illusion that we have control over it, and when that thing inevitably changes or fades away, we experience grief, frustration, or anxiety. This is especially true in relationships. We enter into connections with the hope that they will last forever, but the truth is that nothing in life is guaranteed to remain the same. The key to emotional freedom is to embrace the impermanence of life and to approach everything with a sense of appreciation and gratitude, knowing that it may not always be there. In my own experience, I found that when I embrace the idea that things, whether relationships, careers, or possessions, will eventually change, I am able to enjoy them more fully. The fear of losing them no longer clouds my perception, and I can experience life with more ease. For example, when I was in a romantic relationship that eventually ended, I initially resisted the idea of its impermanence. I feared the loss, which caused anxiety and suffering. But when I began practicing negative visualization, a Stoic technique where you imagine losing something you value, my anxiety was greatly diminished. I started to appreciate the present moment more, knowing that the relationship, like everything else, could change or end at any time. This allowed me to fully enjoy the time we spent together without the constant worry of what might happen in the future. The practice of negative visualization. One of the most powerful Stoic exercises for embracing impermanence is negative visualization. This practice involves mentally imagining the worst-case scenario, such as the loss of a loved one, the end of a relationship, or even the loss of your health or career. While this may sound morbid at first, it actually helps cultivate a deeper sense of gratitude for the present moment. By contemplating the impermanence of all things, we stop taking them for granted and start appreciating them while they are still with us. Imagine you're in a close friendship or a romantic relationship. Take a moment to think about what your life would look like without that person. This isn't meant to cause distress or sadness, but to remind yourself that nothing is guaranteed. With this awareness, you can let go of the unhealthy desire to control outcomes and instead cherish the time you have, free from anxiety. Negative visualization helps us detach emotionally from the fear of loss and gives us the space to appreciate what we have. Finding peace in acceptance. The Stoic approach to life's impermanence is rooted in acceptance. We cannot control how life unfolds, nor can we stop change from happening, but we can control our response to change. Acceptance does not mean passivity. It's an active choice to let go of the need to control outcomes and instead flow with life's inevitable changes. In my own journey, learning to accept the impermanence of life has been a transformative experience. There was a time when I was deeply afraid of change, especially in relationships. The fear of losing someone I loved or of a relationship ending made me cling to it even tighter, and in doing so, I created unnecessary stress and anxiety. But when I began to embrace impermanence, I found peace. I accepted that relationships, like everything else, are temporary, and that their value lies not in their permanence, but in their presence. When I learned to let go of the fear of losing, I was able to live more fully in the moment. The Stoic art of detachment. Embracing the impermanence of life is not about withdrawing from relationships or experiences. It's not about avoiding attachment altogether, but rather learning to detach from the expectation that things must remain the same in order for us to be happy. We can still love, connect, and cherish the moments we have, but we must also understand that these things will change. This realization helps us avoid unnecessary suffering when change inevitably occurs. The Stoic art of detachment teaches us to let go of the need for control and to live with a sense of inner peace, regardless of external circumstances. It encourages us to focus on what is within our control, our thoughts, actions, and reactions, and to accept the impermanence of everything else. This is the ultimate path to emotional freedom. Not the suppression of emotions, but the understanding that change is the natural order of things. Conclusion. Embracing the impermanence of life is a key Stoic principle that, when fully understood, can bring profound peace and emotional resilience. Life's fleeting nature teaches us to cherish the present moment, let go of attachments, and accept the inevitability of change. By practicing acceptance, we free ourselves from the fear of loss and open ourselves up to the fullness of life. Life is not a static entity, but a dynamic journey, and the more we accept its impermanence, the more we can live fully, without the fear of what's to come. Number 2, master your emotions through rational thought. It's a common belief that emotions have the power to control us. When we face emotional turmoil, we naturally feel sadness, anger, or pain. These reactions are a byproduct of emotional attachment. But here's an important truth. Emotions are not facts. They are shaped by our thoughts, beliefs, and interpretations of events. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that while we cannot control the world around us, we have full authority over our minds. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This principle is the foundation of emotional detachment. It begins by recognizing that your thoughts dictate your emotional state. Your interpretations of someone's actions or presence can either amplify your pain or bring you peace. For instance, if you're navigating the aftermath of a breakup, your mind might create a narrative that intensifies your hurt. Thoughts like, "I wasn't good enough," or "I'll never find someone like them again." But what if you reframed those thoughts? By reminding yourself that their departure does not define your worth, you take the first step toward emotional freedom. Rational thinking allows you to shift your perspective and regain control, enabling you to face life with resilience and clarity. You're emotionally shattered, replaying conversations in your mind, overanalyzing every detail, and asking yourself questions like, "Why did this happen?" Or, "How could they move on so easily?" The pain feels overwhelming, but the Stoic response offers a different path, a way to shift your focus and regain clarity. Instead of letting your emotions take control, the Stoics urge us to ask, "What are the facts? How can I think about this differently?" This mental shift is crucial. You must actively choose thoughts that free you from emotional suffering rather than thoughts that fuel it. Think about it for a moment. When something upsetting happens, an argument with a loved one, feeling ignored, or being disappointed, what's the first thing you do? You interpret the event and assign it meaning. But here's a key insight from Stoicism. It's not the event itself that causes your emotional turmoil. It's the way you perceive it. Marcus Aurelius put it succinctly, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." This means your emotions are a direct reflection of your internal dialogue. Let's break this down with an example. Imagine you send a heartfelt message to someone you care about, a friend, romantic partner, or family member. Hours pass with no response. Immediately, your mind starts racing. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset with me? Do they even care? With each passing minute, your emotions escalate. What starts as mild concern quickly grows into frustration, anxiety, or even anger. But what's the actual truth of the situation? Is it the delay in their response causing your emotional storm, or is it your interpretation of their silence? The Stoic response is to challenge these automatic emotional reactions with rational thought. Ask yourself, what are the facts? The fact is simply this: they haven't responded. Everything else, your assumptions about their feelings or intentions, is speculation. Instead of letting your emotions spiral, pause and recognize that your anxiety or sense of rejection isn't rooted in reality, but in your own thoughts. Marcus Aurelius's advice is invaluable here. Question your thoughts. Don't just accept them as truth. I once found myself in this exact situation with a close friend. We had been discussing something important when suddenly they stopped responding. At first, I thought nothing of it. But as hours turned into a full day, unease began to creep in. Maybe they're upset with me, I thought. Maybe I said something wrong. By the end of the night, I had convinced myself that our friendship was on the verge of collapse. My emotions were everywhere: worry, guilt, frustration. The next morning, I stopped to evaluate what had actually happened. The truth: nothing. My friend had simply gotten busy. When I reached out calmly later that day, they responded as if nothing was wrong, completely unaware of the emotional storm I had put myself through. In that moment of clarity, I remembered Marcus Aurelius's words. Focus on what is within your control, your thoughts, your actions, not the outcomes or the feelings of others. By redirecting my mind to what I could control, I was able to let go of the unnecessary emotional turmoil I had created for myself. If you're still reading, take a moment to reflect. Have you noticed similar patterns in your own relationships? If so, share your insights in the comments below. They might help someone else recognize and break free from the same cycle. Number 3. Accept the reality of impermanence. One of the fundamental truths of life is that everything is impermanent. People, relationships, situations, none of them last forever. Yet, as human beings, we often find ourselves clinging to the illusion of permanence. We want the people we care about to stay in our lives forever, the circumstances we enjoy to never change, and the good times to last endlessly. But Stoicism teaches us a different perspective, one rooted in the acceptance of life's transience. When you truly accept impermanence, something remarkable happens. The fear of losing what you value diminishes. Take relationships, for example. Most of us enter relationships assuming they will last forever. We plan futures with people and invest emotionally in the belief that this connection is permanent. But this assumption is not only unrealistic, it sets us up for suffering. Rather than clinging to the false hope of permanence, the Stoic approach encourages us to cherish what we have while we have it, fully aware that it will eventually change or end. This shift in perspective is not about fostering detachment out of apathy, but about fostering gratitude for the present moment and the people in your life. I once had a relationship where I was consumed by anxiety about it ending. The thought of losing that person loomed over me constantly. I found myself clinging to the relationship, trying to control every detail in an attempt to secure its future. But the more I tried to hold on, the more I suffered. It wasn't until I began practicing negative visualization, a Stoic exercise that involves imagining worst-case scenarios, that I found peace. I allowed myself to picture life without that person. I visualized the pain of the relationship ending, the loneliness I might feel, and the uncertainty of moving forward. As painful as this exercise was, it had an unexpected benefit. It reminded me to appreciate the relationship while it lasted. When the relationship eventually ended, I was more prepared than I thought I would be. The exercise didn't take away the sadness, but it gave me resilience. I was able to move forward because I had already accepted the possibility of loss. The gift of negative visualization lies in the emotional stability it cultivates. By repeatedly imagining worst-case scenarios, you train your mind to face uncertainty with calmness and courage. You become less shaken by the inevitable changes and losses in life. Accepting impermanence is not about detaching from life or relationships altogether. It's about letting go of the illusion that things will stay the same. When you accept that change is the only constant, you free yourself from unnecessary suffering. Imagine this. You're holding sand in your hand. If you clutch it tightly, the sand slips through your fingers. But if you hold it gently, with an open hand, you can appreciate its presence without trying to control it. Relationships and life's moments are like that sand, beautiful and meaningful when appreciated, but impossible to hold on to forever. In the end, emotional detachment through the acceptance of impermanence doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you learn to care deeply without clinging. You love fully while letting go of the need for guarantees. And when the inevitable changes of life arrive, you'll be ready, not because you don't feel, but because you've embraced the reality that nothing stays the same. This is the beauty of Stoicism. It teaches us to face life's transience with grace and gratitude, finding peace in what we have while it lasts, and strength to move forward when it's gone. Rule 4. Focus on what you can control. One of the core teachings of Stoicism, and perhaps one of the most empowering realizations to embrace, is that some things are within your control, while others are not. When it comes to emotionally detaching from someone, this distinction becomes absolutely essential. Why? Because so much of the pain we feel in relationships comes from our desire to control things that are beyond our reach. In his meditations, Marcus Aurelius repeatedly emphasizes the importance of focusing only on what lies within our control, our thoughts, actions, and responses. Everything else, including others' behaviors, outcomes of situations, or the passage of time, is outside of our influence. Trying to control what's beyond our reach leads to suffering. Emotional detachment, then, is not about distancing yourself coldly from others, but about letting go of attachments to outcomes that you cannot dictate. For instance, you cannot control how someone else feels about you. This truth can be hard to accept, especially when you're deeply attached to someone, whether it's a romantic partner, a friend, or a family member. It's natural to want them to feel as strongly about you as you do about them, but you cannot make someone love or appreciate you, nor can you force them to treat you the way you deserve. The only thing you can control is how you respond to their actions. Reflect on a time when you tried to influence someone's feelings or behavior. Perhaps you went out of your way to win their affection, or you exhausted yourself trying to prove your worth to a friend who didn't value you in return. How did that feel? Likely, it left you feeling frustrated, anxious, and powerless because you were chasing something beyond your control. In my own experience, I was once in a relationship where I felt like I was constantly working to keep things together. No matter how much effort I put into planning dates, sending thoughtful messages, or being emotionally available, it always felt like I was one step behind. When they would pull away, I would try harder, stuck in a cycle of endless anxiety. But when I finally embraced the Stoic principle of focusing only on what I could control, my actions and my sense of self-worth, I found relief. I realized I couldn't make them care more deeply about me. All I could control was my response. In that moment, I chose to detach. The sense of peace that came from letting go of that emotional burden was immense. One of the most liberating things you can do for yourself is to embrace emotional autonomy. The idea that your happiness, peace, and emotional stability are not dependent on someone else's behavior or feelings. When you place your emotional well-being in someone else's hands, you give away your power. You become a prisoner to their actions, moods, and decisions. Imagine you're in a friendship where you constantly feel sidelined. Your friend doesn't make time for you like they used to, and you feel neglected. Naturally, this hurts, and you might find yourself wondering what you did wrong or why they've distanced themselves. But here's the key. Their behavior is outside your control. The only thing within your power is how you choose to respond. Will you spend your energy trying to win back their attention, or will you focus on nurturing relationships and activities that bring you joy and fulfillment? When you shift your attention to what you can control, your own emotional state, you reclaim your power. You no longer wait for someone else's validation to feel whole. Instead, you create your own sense of emotional balance, independent of external circumstances. I, too, have had friendships where I realized I was giving too much power to how others treated me. If they were distant or dismissive, I felt unworthy. If they were warm and attentive, I felt valued. It was an exhausting roller coaster of emotions. But when I began applying Stoic principles, I made a conscious decision to stop tying my self-worth to others' actions. I focused on cultivating my own emotional well-being, no longer allowing their behavior to dictate my inner peace. This didn't mean I cared less. It meant I stopped letting their actions disrupt my equilibrium. The ultimate goal of emotional detachment isn't indifference. It's achieving a stable sense of self that remains unshaken by the unpredictability of others. Acceptance. Embracing what you can't control. Acceptance means understanding that life is unpredictable, that people are unpredictable, and that no matter how much we wish we could control everything, we simply can't. What we can do is accept things as they are, not as we wish they would be. Imagine you're dealing with a breakup. You feel lost, hurt, and overwhelmed. Your mind races with questions. What if I had done something differently? Why did this happen? Can I fix this? These are natural questions, but they're rooted in a desire to control something that has already happened, a desire to reverse the outcome. Instead of tormenting yourself with what-ifs, the Stoic response is to accept the reality of the situation. Marcus Aurelius writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the obstacles we face are not hindrances, but opportunities to grow. When you accept what's outside your control, you stop wasting energy trying to change the past or influence others, and start focusing on how you can move forward. In one of the toughest times of my life, I experienced the sudden, painful loss of a relationship I thought was solid. At first, I was consumed by the desire to understand why it happened and what I could have done differently. But slowly I realized the only way to find peace was to accept the situation as it was, not as I wanted it to be. I couldn't change the past, and I couldn't control how the other person felt. What I could control was my reaction to that loss. Instead of clinging to what was gone, I embraced the present reality and found strength in acceptance. Rule 5. Reflect on the bigger picture. When you're deeply entangled in the emotions of a relationship or a difficult situation, it's easy to lose perspective. Stoic philosophy, especially through the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, encourages us to step back and reflect on the grander scheme of things. Aurelius often emphasized that our troubles, fears, and desires are mere fleeting moments in the vastness of time. By adopting this broader viewpoint, emotional detachment becomes easier. Ask yourself important questions like, will this pain matter in 5 years? Does this person define my entire existence? Shifting your focus from immediate emotional turmoil to a higher level of reflection helps you realize that much of your distress is tied to temporary circumstances. Stoicism reminds us that no single person or event should wield such power over our emotional well-being. When you're overly attached to someone, it's easy to make them the center of your universe. your happiness and self-worth can become entangled with their presence or absence in your life. But stepping back and seeing the bigger picture reminds you that life is ever-changing, and relationships, however intense, are just one part of your journey. You are a complete individual with your own path and experiences. In the heat of a breakup or emotional conflict, it may be challenging to grasp this perspective. But reflecting on the larger scope of your life helps you understand that you've survived emotional storms before. Life moved on, and so did you. Think back to previous relationships or moments when you thought your world was falling apart. Those wounds healed, and you became stronger and wiser. This is the natural rhythm of life. In my own experience, I once went through a painful breakup that felt like the end of my world. For weeks, I fixated on the past, feeling like the future had lost its brightness. But with time, I allowed myself to reflect on the bigger picture. I realized that this person, while important, was not the defining moment of my life. They were part of my journey, but not my entire story. By zooming out, I saw the relationship as just one chapter in a much larger narrative, and I began to emotionally detach. The Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius, emphasized the impermanence of all things: relationships, emotions, situations. Everything in life is transient, and what truly matters is how we respond to these inevitable changes. By reflecting on the bigger picture, you cultivate a sense of inner peace, knowing that life will continue to flow, regardless of your temporary attachments. Emotional detachment. A path to inner peace. This broader perspective allows you to emotionally detach, not because you stop caring, but because you understand that clinging too tightly to fleeting things only leads to unnecessary suffering. Emotional detachment is not about apathy. It's about understanding that life is much larger than any single person, relationship, or moment of pain. By seeing your life as a vast, interconnected web of experiences, you free yourself from the tunnel vision that emotional attachment can create. Ultimately, emotional detachment is not about shutting down your emotions or closing yourself off from the world. It's about building resilience and gaining control over how you respond to life's inevitable changes. The Stoic path offers not a quick fix, but a way to inner peace. By embracing impermanence, mastering your emotions through rational thought, and reflecting on the bigger picture, you'll find that emotional detachment is an act of self-liberation. So the next time you feel yourself gripping too tightly to someone or something, ask yourself, do I control my emotions, or do they control me? Emotional freedom awaits those who dare to let go.